This video is sponsored by Wondershare UniConverter. This nifty bit of software is a Swiss Army knife for most of your media conversion needs. Need to download videos off YouTube for a video essay? They got you covered. Did you film something in the wrong video format or size and need to convert it to something different? They do that too. Do you need to record your screen for any reason? How do you think I got these screen recordings? UniConverter does just about everything from burning DVDs to fixing video metadata to making GIFs. GIFs? GIFs. It's all your media needs in one convenient tool. More details are available in the link in the description, so go check it out. Now, on with the show. The Motion Picture Production Code, or as it's more popularly known, the Hays Code, was a stringent set of moral codes and self-censorship guidelines that lorded over mainstream Hollywood from the 1930s to the late 1960s. It forbade on-screen nudity, sexual promiscuity, drug use, harsh language, excessive violence, and severely regulated how certain people and institutions could be portrayed. Marriages had to be portrayed as happy, negative portrayals of the nation's leaders or clergy were frowned upon, and the bad guys always had to lose in the end. Throughout this era, filmmakers and artists were able to skirt and appeal these issues. However, one only needs to watch a few films from those years to see just how effectively this code was enforced. Be it noir, a romance, or a horror film, movies from the era of the Hays Code are pretty squeaky clean by today's standards. Hollywood was in a moral chokehold, unable to spread its artistic wings and bring their films into more murky, artistically fulfilling directions. By the late 1960s, the Hays Code had all but been abandoned, and was eventually replaced by the MPAA's rating system, leaving it to the viewer's discretion as to what degree of quote-unquote mature content they might prefer to see. And the change in the landscape of film and television in the intervening 50 years has been drastic. In the year of our Lord 2020, most prestige television is rated TVMA, and the movies that bear the R rating wear it like a badge of honor. This film is rated R, and therefore it is automatically more artistically sound than other films. These are the movies for grown-ups, or at least this is the perception that I have gotten in the last few years. Cable and streaming services craft more artistically viable shows because they don't have network TV's restrictions on violence, language, and nudity. Superhero movies are now breaking their PG-13 bonds and embracing R ratings so they can be done properly. Many claim that the R rating's lack of restrictions enables filmmakers to make films that speak to the adults in the room. And when you venture into the PG-13 territory, such poignancy begins to be watered down, right? Or perhaps has the pendulum swung a little too far in the other direction? 2017 saw the release of Dunkirk, Christopher Nolan's war film about the titular rescue of Britain's armies off the beaches of Dunkirk during World War II. The film was met with praise, was nominated for an Oscar, and even made it to number 2 on Quentin Tarantino's favorite movies of the decade. But before it was released, this film was mired in controversy. Not because of any creative choice or historical inaccuracy, for the most part, but because of its MPAA rating. You see, the war epic was rated PG-13, and many film critics and commentators felt that this was a mistake. Matt Goldberg of Collider wrote, "What the PG-13 rating implies is that while there will be death in this movie, it's not going to be at the level of Saving Private Ryan or Hacksaw Ridge. And that's troubling because war has a cost, and real people fought and died at Dunkirk. To avoid showing the ugliness of this conflict just so you can get a rating that allows teenagers to buy tickets without a parent doesn't seem right." Suddenly, Nolan's entire artistic vision for the film was called into question, all due to its rating, before anyone had even seen the film. These critiques prompted him to explain that he saw the film as more of a thriller than a war movie, but the implications of this situation troubled me. According to the talking heads of the internet, there is only one way to make a war movie, with blood and guts galore, embracing the hardest R rating possible. Forget the countless gut-wrenching and classic war movies that rated G, PG, and PG-13. Apparently, if you are to make a modern war movie, it has to be rated R. And yet, with Dunkirk, Nolan produced one of the most visceral war movies of the 21st century. Plenty of war movies have turned my stomach, but few have created the sheer nerve-shredding tension of war that Nolan reproduces utilizing claustrophobic filmmaking and shrieking sound design. Dunkirk features none of the blood and viscera films like Hacksaw Ridge or Saving Private Ryan, yet still creates horrifying and disturbing imagery. Let's take, for example, this scene where a soldier is trapped underwater as the oil-covered waves above him are set ablaze. We don't get to see the soldier burn alive. No nauseating close-ups of charred flesh. But we don't need them. Just a few seconds of footage and a few screams set our brains to work on images and thoughts far more horrible than anything Nolan might have filmed. Sometimes what you choose to omit is far more effective than what you show. Christopher Nolan is a master at this sort of filmmaking. Take The Dark Knight as a prime example. I've seen countless gory, disturbing horror films, but few of those visuals stuck with me quite as much as this goon getting a pencil shoved through his eye, or this guy's cheek being sliced open after Joker's grisly story about his scars, or the cell phone bomb inside this guy's stomach, or this video in which Joker tortures a would-be Batman. Every one of these scenes unsettled me, and not a one features a single drop of blood. When Joker breaks a pool cue in two and forces these goons to fight to the death, it's the absence of visuals that makes it so effective. The idea of someone desperately running their friend through with a splintered pool cue is far more disturbing to me than actually watching it happen utilizing special effects. Hearing this guy's horrified screams lets our minds race, filling in the blanks of what he must be experiencing. Sometimes, not showing something is far more effective than showing it. Now, would any of these scenes or films be improved if they were rated R? Who's to say? But if I had to guess, I'd say no. A few more F-bombs or some blood and gore added to The Dark Knight wouldn't have made it any better or worse than it already is. Likewise, despite many film aficionados' initial speculations, Dunkirk is a masterpiece just the way it is. With these films, Nolan was able to create films that are disturbing, exciting, thought-provoking, and very adult, while coming out the other side with a PG-13 rating. Because the rating isn't really a factor to Nolan. He's just telling stories. And here we come to the point. I feel the R rating has become a little overrated. As though the only way to make a truly artistic film is to aim for the most restrictive of the MPAA ratings, to just cut loose in the violence, language, and nudity departments. As though those things are a requirement to create something that has any real merit to it. I've seen articles and interviews and even fandoms demanding their favorite characters be given the grown-up treatment. I see this thinking in the way that HBO and Netflix makes their shows, where a pair of on-screen boobs and a few F-bombs elevate them to prestige status. I see it in the motion picture industry, where somehow PG-13 has become the de facto family movie category, but the R rating is what filmmakers campaign for to give their films some grit. And I feel this kind of thinking is reductive and misguided. Now, I can already see people in the comments getting ready to call me a prude, so before I continue, let me clarify what I am not saying. I am not advocating for a return to the Hays Code. I am not asking for films to be completely squeaky clean affairs. I am not saying that no movie should be rated R or feature harsh language, sex, or violence. I am always an advocate for more freedom for creators, and many films require R-rated adult content to properly tell their stories. Take Saving Private Ryan as an example. It wouldn't be Saving Private Ryan without its stomach-churningly realistic depiction of war. This realism was deemed so important that it was the first R-rated film to be aired on ABC completely uncensored. Can you imagine a version of Goodfellas where they don't swear? Hardened gangsters saying phooey or darn doesn't exactly feel right. Quentin Tarantino has made an entire career out of making films filled to the brim with over-the-top bloodshed and cursing, and without these factors, they honestly don't really feel like Tarantino films. It's a part of his style. The whole point of a comedy like Deadpool is that it is highly profane, and without it being highly profane, it's not really Deadpool anymore. Or heck, let's just take this joke from Ghostbusters, a PG-rated movie.
Everything was fine with our system until the power grid was shut off by Dickless here.
Is this true?
Yes, it's true. This man has no dick.
In the televised cut of this film, they switch out the word dick with brain, making this joke, "This man has no brain," which, let's face it, is just not as funny. Swearing, violence, sex, all of these are tools in the tool belt of an artist, which, when used well, help craft something great. So no, I am not advocating for the censoring of any and all R-rated films or putting more constraints on artists. Rather, the point of this video is to illustrate how we can sometimes limit creators by our overemphasis on certain MPAA ratings as artistic markers. When we label films rated G or PG as nothing but children's films, we suddenly force filmmakers into a strange position where they have to beef up their ratings with a few extra swear words to ensure that their film is viewed in a credible light. When we label PG-13 as the rating for the largest demographic of people, suddenly artists have to fit into this box to reach their audience. And when the R rating or TVMA rating is seen as the only content for mature adults, suddenly films whose content doesn't merit an R rating is seen as lesser than. As though a PG-rated drama like October Sky is less artistically viable for adults than Deadpool. As an example of this, let's take a look at when last year's horror remake Black Christmas was announced as being rated PG-13. Many in the horror community revolted, as every prior iteration of this film had been rated R. And the filmmakers, like Christopher Nolan before them, had to come out and explain to people why the film was PG-13. This is what I'm talking about. It bothers me when a filmmaker has to come out and defend their film's rating, as though the rating has anything to do with the quality of the film. Now, Black Christmas did not wind up being a very good movie, but making the kills gorier wouldn't have improved it much if it was already bad. One might argue that a horror film needs to be rated R, just as a war film needs to be rated R, but this sort of thinking ignores so many amazing PG-13 rated horror films like Insidious, or The Ring, or A Quiet Place, or The Exorcism of Emily Rose, as though all a horror film needs to succeed is an R rating. Whenever someone says something needs a certain rating, it annoys me to no end, as though the only reason a film like Logan succeeded was because of its R rating. Did that rating afford them freedom to explore some of Logan's darker storylines and truly embrace the violent nature of the character? Yes. But to say that the exact same movie wouldn't have been good without the blood and its 45 F-words is to truly downplay the amazing work on display by the cast, director James Mangold, and writer Scott Frank. They made a creative choice to go for a bloodier, more adult film, and that was a good choice, but they could have made an incredible film regardless if the studio had given them the creative freedom, and I am tired of people reducing that down to a rating. And sometimes the R rating can feel a little unnecessary. Like, did we really need to see someone's face getting cut off in Birds of Prey? Did that really improve the movie at all? Did we really need an R-rated cut of Batman vs. Superman? Yes, that cut was slightly better, but only because they re-added plot points that made the previously nonsensical plot make a little bit more sense. I often watch shows on Netflix and HBO and Starz, and it starts to feel like they're just trying to one-up each other in the adult content division, adding more and more and more gratuitous violence and nudity for no other reason than to prove that they make adult and edgy content. Like, it's weird to me that all of these shows are rated TVMA, because if they provide as much creative freedom as they claim to, wouldn't we see a larger diversity of ratings and content from them? I feel you don't have to look any further than a network like AMC to see that creative freedom, not gratuitous adult content, is what makes good TV. AMC shows like Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, and Mad Men are still ranked as some of the best television ever created while abiding by the standards of network TV. These shows are every bit as good as shows on HBO or Netflix, but without constant nudity in the first few seasons to draw in viewers before actresses can negotiate new contracts. And again, I am not advocating for a return to the Hays Code, but what I am saying is that I feel like creators and networks and studios feel as though they have to pump in R-rated content in order to appeal to their audiences. Like kids in middle school cussing and bragging about made-up sex stories to impress their friends. I feel we can sometimes mistake creativity for mature content without much artistic intent behind it. It's like, for years, artists were banned from using the color purple in their art, and eventually those rules went away and people started using the color purple freely. But at a certain point, every show I watch is oversaturated with purple, and people are gatekeeping, saying that something needs to be purple if it's going to be for adults, and I wonder why everyone has become so focused on this one color when there's so much more to art. And all of this is just me trying to point out all of the ways that artists and studios and audiences fall into this rut of only one kind of filmmaking. Not every project is improved with boobs, blood, and guts, and not every project needs to be squeaky clean. Sometimes a lack of limitations helps a project. Other times, self-imposed limitations can provide avenues for further creativity. We need creators and audiences to think outside the box and not let the social zeitgeist dictate the rating of their projects. And that is what it all comes down to for me. Artists should be free to create without being put in boxes of what rating a film should or should not have, because there's a lot more to movies than just their ratings.